I think we finally got going. Sorry for the slight delay there. Pelton had the Northern Regional lead for speed in the north. And today we're going to be looking at some perhaps some tips that you can do for training your athletes, probably really preparing for a full lockdown that they might be able to do in the garden to keep ticking over, with a few other ideas on top of that. But it's really stuff that they can do over and above going outside. Just like to sort of welcome all the coaches in quarantine. It's been a strange time. I passed my 25-year mark as a qualified coach last Friday. Never did I ever imagine that I wouldn't have been coaching for the couple of weeks before, and likely for a couple of weeks afterwards. So it is very strange times, and I think the only way we will get through it is if we work together and we help our athletes together. So hopefully, there's a few ideas as we go through. If there's any ideas you have, if you could share those as well, that'd be greatly appreciated. And the final thing is, last night I had a problem with the sound. It was only when I turned off a number of the Wi-Fi devices in the house that sorted that out. There were also a few people had problems leaving messages. Apparently, if you refresh and click the entry in again, that should allow you to. If that doesn't, alternatively, if you cut and paste the link into your browser, then come in, it should allow you in through there. As I said, necessity, the mother of all inventions. Never have I experienced anything like this, where we've had to adapt so much and adapt what we're doing. And I don't think athletes will ever experience this type of occasion as well, with national leagues being cancelled, English schools being cancelled, internationals being cancelled. It is quite unprecedented. So we have to adapt, we have to change, but that's what we do as coaches. So hopefully, if out of tonight, if other people have a few ideas and you can perhaps share them, then if you want to email me to them, I can share those out amongst the other people who email in for information. So at this time of year, what really is important? I've had plenty of time to read, and I've actually bothered to read the front section of Ralph Mann's biomechanics book, which I'd never ever read before. And there's some really interesting, if not quite opinionated stuff in there. According to Ralph Mann, body build, well, we're not really going to change that. We get what we get as coaches. Strength potential, we can certainly look at that over the next few weeks, stroke months. Endurance potential, flexibility potential, mental potential, mechanics potential, conditioning potential, and the development level of the athletes. Again, what I will try and look at as we go through is how you can change some of the exercises depending on the development level, and also how you can adapt them for athletes with various disabilities, what you can change, and it might not be very much, but we can have a look at that. I've assumed that the athletes that we have little equipment and a small garden / backyard space, with the allowance to go out for an hour a day, but I've sort of allowed what most of the athletes will have. I hope that some of the equipment we have, some of the athletes, your athletes have. If not, it's fairly easily purchased and delivered. So we can still affect as coaches what the athletes are doing over this period. We'll have a look at those as we go through. My background, I work with athletes from under 15 up to international level. So our group consists of a number of coaches. I think some of them are watching online at the moment. We very much work together, and at under 15 level try to get the athletes to cover a range of events, and only really start to specialise at under 17s. I believe passionately about the integration of disability and able-bodied athletics. I have a range of disability athletes as part of the group, and I really believe as a coach that has challenged me to become a better coach and understand movement better and understand how we do things better. I really believe fundamentals are the key to success. Work the basics well and everything else comes together. It's not rocket science. I'm not a sports scientist. My background is an ex-athlete and having to sort of learn as my athletes progressed. And really believe, as Mike said last night, and there's quite a lot of similarities between what I'll say tonight and what Mike said last night. Good movement is a key to success. You know, if we're really going to make good athletes, they need to move well. And what we'll look at, how to work with your athletes of different degrees of ability, and how to progress and regress, the exercises that we look at. Ralph Mann again from his biomechanics book, well worth purchase if you haven't already got it. The Biomechanics of Sprinting and Hurdling, available on Amazon for about £20. For young athletes, the primary goal should be to have fun and play lots of sports. So the range of movements that young athletes get from a range of sports actually sets them up. We can actually look at some of that and prepare them over this period to actually hopefully set themselves up going forwards to make them better athletes in the long term. It shouldn't be wasted time, this. It should really be about us setting them up so that when they get back down to the track, they are actually better prepared than they would have been. There's lots of the stuff that I've put in tonight that I have to be honest, we don't do enough of because we haven't got enough time. But if there's one time athletes will have time, it's now. And it's, you know, I've said to mine, it's up to them to step up to the plate and actually start to take some responsibility, make sure they do stuff. They know a lot more than they think they know. So hopefully to make sure that they start to implement that and start to be a bit clever about how they train and what they do. Ralph also said, I'm firmly against early structured training for young athletes. I believe that talent will always find a way. I think one thing we need to get across to the athletes is, you know, we're all in the same boat. Never has that statement ever been true. Talent will find a way. If they're a good athlete, they will still be a good athlete. We just need to maximise what we can and how we do it. Lorraine Booth asked, what was a book you've just suggested? Ralph Mann, The Biomechanics of Sprinting and Hurdling. Really, really good book. Sets out quite a lot of the theory being, well, facts actually about how you sprint, gives you a lot of background. It's a really good book to read. The mental side of it at the moment, this relates to athletes believing that they are better prepared than the athlete next to them. That's always how I've worked. If an athlete believes they're better prepared, they will perform better. So you need to work with your athletes over this period to make them believe that what they're doing will benefit them, and that when they come out of this, they will actually be a stronger athlete because of it. It isn't a backward step. It's a pause. It's a chance for us to perhaps go back and do some of the basics a bit longer and a bit better, and hopefully the season will be extended a bit longer and we can get a bit more into it. And a lot of that comes down to the trust in the coach. All athletes, as I said, are in the same boat at the moment, as are we as coaches. And I've spoken to a number of coaches over the last few days who've come up with some quite novel ways of keeping in contact with their athletes and doing things. And during this time, we can probably make a bigger difference than we believe. We can actually really have a positive impact all the way through this period. Flexibility, one of my big bugbears. It's a really easy win at the moment. Athletes have more time than they have ever had, so they've got no excuses. If any of mine come back less flexible than when they left, good God, I'm probably going to brain a few of them, but this is an excellent opportunity for them to really to work on the flexibility side of things and to really start to improve. I've issued all of mine with all of my athletes with a stretching sheet. It went out via email with a few other things which I'm quite happy to share with people if they don't have them, but you know, there are absolutely no excuses for them not to come back more flexible, more able than when they went. A fascia and trigger release. again, one of my big bugbears, rollers and release balls. They are used. I don't think athletes fully understand them. Again, I've issued them all some information about how to use the rollers, how to use the release balls, to make sure that we get rid of everything that we possibly can, and make sure that they're coming back ready to actually get some decent speed work in fairly early on, and really start to improve. I really believe as a coach that we have to keep a base of speed throughout the season, and we have to we have to keep that speed going all the way through. Pilates, yoga, I know Mike mentioned it last night. There's plenty of resources online for this at the moment. Lots of free classes, really good opportunity for athletes to get involved and get involved. I've seen a few people asking for the stretch sheets. At the end, I'll give you my email address. Anybody who emails me, I've got a pack of information together that I will email out to you tomorrow. Challenge of the current generation, relatively inactive compared to 30 years ago. I think we've all seen this walking down the track. More time seated, hips flexed, knees flexed in a flex position, less time walking, running, more time at computer games, consoles and phones, basically much more time in activities that don't help. One of the big worries at the moment is that's all we see the athletes do is get back onto the computers, spend more time on that rather than actually doing what we can do. So, you know, hopefully we can try and address those and get them going. Mechanics, we do a number of tests with the athletes that are coming up through the DICE program, which was a former ACE program, just looking at how they move. And it's worth the athletes, I think, understanding these. And again, I can send out the sheets. I've just taken a bit of a crop of a few of them. Deep squat, it gives a few points about what they're looking at. If they video themselves, they can look back, they can see what the knees are doing, whether they're able to keep a flat back, and score themselves against a score sheet. The marks also, it gives you a few points where you can look at actually, if this is wrong, what might be causing it, and then they can go back to the flexibility, they can go back to the trigger release, and perhaps try and get themselves in a better position so that when they come down to the track, they are actually running and you know, actually able to move a lot better. Hurdle step over, it's just a simple hurdle step over. You'll see some of the demonstrations I've got a bit later. Two very different athletes. They were called in at very short notice. One is my son, and one is one of the other athletes, Joshua. They live, you know, well, Jonathan obviously lives here, and Joshua just around the corner. So we did go up to a field and just try and do some of the exercises just to get you some videos to demonstrate what you're looking at and how you're doing it. So you'll see some issues there that I know they're there. You'll see some of the movement issues. This kind of hurdle step over really exacerbates those, where it's really controlled and slow and just stepping over. And again, they can set it up themselves with a stick across two paint tins. Lots and lots of ways for them to do this, to set up a hurdle even if they haven't got the hurdle at home. Inline lunge, just with a broomstick through the legs. Again, they can video straight on, just looking at whether they can keep things straight, keep things in line. And it gives them a few pointers again. I'm quite happy to send this out. It will give them a few pointers about what they can look at, and what they can try and correct, and what they can go back and perhaps have a look at on the flexibility side. So the first lot of exercise we're going to look at, and we will have a break after this for questions. So if you've got any questions, Shani's manning those, and we'll pull them together, and we will go through those when we come up to the questions slide. So multi-directional movements, if any of the NCDP are on, and I've seen quite a few of the names popping up. This is Tony Hadley's stuff. We do this quite a lot. It's a really good rehab stuff. It's really good for keeping some fast foot movements in, and you don't need a lot of space. So it's excellent for this time of, you know, where we are, what's happening. Thanks, Mike. I was going to mention the Joanne Elphinstone book later. It's really good good to keep them moving, keep the fast footwork moving, keep really good footwork moving. So I've just a few videos of this. You may have to know because I need to shift them around a bit. So as I try and find them, they will might take a while. Two, back one, forwards two, back one. It does really take the context tight. So really fast foot movement and keeping that working. So on that, literally, it is all just keeping footwork moving, keeping everything fast, keeping everything engaged, keeping the core engaged, trying to stop any lateral movements and try and stop any dipping of movements. The next one, again, I've got a sheet with these all typed out. So again, I can pop those through. Mary's just said, "Is the sound bad for anyone?" Mary, I had troubles last night, and as soon as I disconnected a few of the Wi-Fi devices in the house, it was absolutely fine afterwards. So I don't know whether we've had a few problems with that. I don't know whether Shani could put a comment to that extent in case people aren't hearing. So the next one is side to sides, literally fast foot contacts, coming side to side, round the cones, trying to keep everything, the hips straight on, trying to keep everything moving. We try and keep the toes a bit tighter. The grass was quite long, but keep the toes really tight and really work the foot contacts on that one. And the next one, if I can find it in amongst these. Again, just showing how you can change it, putting a bar above the head, making them extend the core a bit more, really start to extend the core. Really good for young athletes. This just makes them start to think about really elongating through the core, extending through and working that out. So really, really good for younger athletes. 2 meters forwards, 1 meter backwards, side to sides in between, bringing a broomstick overhead. And then to make it more difficult for senior athletes, a medicine ball or a weight or a full bottle of water, anything out in front of them in order to really start to make them engage the core whilst they're moving through. Finally, we split the cones by sort of every other cone. One goes 1 meter, the other goes the other meter, so they end up 2 meters apart. And these were a bit of a lower movement and a lot more sort of directional movements in between. So on these, there's a lot more vertical movement across, a lot of faster foot contacts, and then we finish off with some high knees around the cones through there. So really at the moment, if the athletes, I didn't have my cones with me, they're locked in the track store cupboard, and had a set of relay battens or a couple of sets of relay battens, so I ended up just using those. Improvisation is very much the key of the day at the moment. So whatever we can do, use. If you've got a weight, they can hold the weight straight out in front of them as well. I would only tend to work on that with older athletes. I wouldn't tend to introduce weights with younger athletes. That's very much once we've mastered the skills and the moving right, we start to bring those in. Shani, sorry, what was the water bottle idea? Getting a 2 litre bottle of water and really starting to holding that out in front of them rather than a medicine ball. If we don't have medicine balls, actually starting to move things around. So Mike Leonard, another great book, Removement and Stability is Sport and Performance Movement by Joanne Elphinstone. One of the best books. I have it, funny enough, literally right here. Really, really good book, well worth looking at and buying over this period and having a look at that. So absolutely superb book. It was one I was going to recommend as well. What do I mean by older? It depends on how stable they are. I've got some 14, 15-year-olds who are very, very stable, who've been doing things for a long time, who have been with us for 4 or 5 years and have got a strong background in athletics. There's others who haven't been there that long, who aren't that stable, who I wouldn't introduce that kind of thing with. I work on the basis that they have to earn the right to progress. So you really want them to be stable before they progress on to the next thing. So something we'll look at later is actually starting to bring single leg stuff in, and you'll start to see the issues that happen on that. I would make sure they're very, very stable on double leg before I brought single leg in, for example. So you'll see some of the issues in a minute when we look at some of the single leg hops and sticks and some of the single leg problems. I recommend a step box, do squat jumps onto box. Yeah, well done, Paul. We'll be coming on to some of that. We will be looking at some jumps and sticks, up and sticks, down and sticks, down off a very small box and react off. Again, until somebody can jump double foot and stick it fairly stably, tend not to bring in the boxes, but once they can, yes, we'll definitely bring in the boxes. So again, it's another example of earning that right to progress. Right, so just cracking on. I've totally lost which slide I was on now, but we'll soon find it and catch up. I will just get back onto the so as Paul just said there about the box jumps, up and stick, down and stick. Yep, we do a lot of jumps and sticks, landing with a flat foot, knee slightly bent, looking for a really flat back and core extended, hips really engaged. The aim is, as soon as they land, to land completely statically, no knee wobble, no rotation of the knees inwards, no rotation of the feet inwards or outwards. So to be able to stick and be able to hold it. So this is very much in preparation for taking them onto the plyometric section. It's also very much ready, preparing them for sprinting. Sprinting is essentially a single leg plyometric action. So the forces that we put through a single leg are absolutely massive when they're running. So really, what this is just, especially for younger athletes, just starting to prepare them for that. So I will try and find some videos on this. I may lose some of the videos later on just to speed things up a bit. So that's the single leg stick, which we will start to look at some of the issues there. So double leg stick, you stick above the head, a great cue. And you can see the aim is really to stick it, not to carry on dropping down from there. Is to actually stick as they do it, but we'll look at some of the issues that then happen when you bring in single leg. So double leg, you could start to see a bit of wobble there. If we bring in single leg, you'll start to see some of the real issues, and this is why I wouldn't really introduce too much of this for younger athletes. You see there the trouble trying to land and stick it, and having to readjust and to make those changes and constantly readjust how they're doing things and what they're doing. So in that instance, I would have gone back and done more double legs, perhaps some up onto boxes, double leg before we'd advanced onto that, perhaps some single leg squats, nothing quite as dynamic to start to prepare ready. But this is stuff that they can be doing in the gardens. It's really, really good, really good exercises for them to be doing in the garden. And it's stuff that they can do which will really, really start to benefit them going forwards. Just flick back to the PowerPoint again. Unfortunately, we couldn't embed the videos into the PowerPoint, so hence why I'm having to flick backwards and forwards. Those were the videos we just saw there. Again, starting with single leg stick with a med ball out in front. It might actually be worth having a look at Josh actually doing these. So if I just dig this one out. That will be a 9. My preview to some box jumps there. So again, if you see medicine ball out in front, starts to make it a bit more difficult. See, Josh has been training a lot longer and is a lot more stable through those exercises. So you can see the difference in the stability and the ability to stick it as soon as he lands, single-legged compared to Jonathan. So that just gives you an idea about the range, and that's probably where I would have gone on that. So, you know, Josh certainly would do single leg, and the way we'd progress that then, once he's able to do that really well, is then starting to circle the ball in front, taking it from side to side, starting to bring some movement in as well as bringing it in. Then to progress it even further, I won't show you this video, but all we would have done is started to make them do lateral sideways jumps, so they're moving sideways rather than forwards all the time, and bringing some sideways movements into it, just to start to make it a bit more difficult, and starting to make it to move and drop through. Basher said, would Jonathan be better at these prior to growth spurts? Yes, he would. He is shooting up. Yeah, he would almost certainly be more stable. A good point, Basher. At times like that, it is worth, you know, as an athlete is growing, sometimes taking a step back and doing the basics again well in order to improve them. Other things athletes can do a lot of at the moment is drills. Again, you don't need much space. We will have a look at some of the drills. You don't need a huge amount of space to do them. The basic ones we do, which all the athletes could do, is basic high knees, pogos, which I will look at. Anybody who's been on one of the courses with me will know it's one of my absolute favourites. Ankling drills, popping drills, step over drills. You will all have your own drills to do. I'm not intending to make a drill session this, but all can be done in confined spaces. And how can we incorporate an element of conditioning into them? Pretty much the same as we've already looked at. Getting a broomstick above the head, getting a ball above the head once they manage to get that, getting them to elongate the core, bringing a medicine ball out in front, starting to circle the medicine ball, bottle of water, even a football, a basketball, anything would absolutely benefit them, and they can do those drills over a really small amount of space. Again, I won't show that video. I know some people are struggling to see some of the videos. That was on circling. We will have a look at this. This is the pogo drill, and we will have a quick look at that because it's, to me, one of the absolute base drills that athletes should be doing. Just have to try and find it for you. So this one is literally trying to keep a straight leg, hitting the ground, reacting off the ground, and trying to create height through foot contacts. So it's a static drill, hitting the ground, trying to create height off, active foot contacts, and back up. We then do that. We tend to do 10 of those and take it out into a run. 10 of those. Take it to 20 in a garden area would be really good. Please don't comment on the state of my grass. I know it's something I'm desperate to try and get sorted out while we're off, not off, but working from home. And then we take it into a forwards run where they'll go forwards and do the pogos actually moving forwards while they do them. So really good contacts to do through there. And then we have introduced another one fairly recently, which is one of my absolute all-time favourites, and I actually picked up from one of the courses in Sheffield from one of the coaches that attended there. And we call this a split squat. I've videoed, I've had to take a video off my phone for this. But again, it's basically a double foot pogo with a split in between, double foot pogo with a split in between, double foot pogo with a split in between. So looking at actually double foot, and then each step they try and split it. It's not the best of videos, but I could possibly attach that onto the email out to people. So, but hopefully it gives you an idea about ways you can really start to progress that drill, and how you can do it and what you can do. Back to the PowerPoint. If it will allow me to move forward. So we've just seen that video. Any questions on those? I think there were some comments came in from Andy Woodward. I found that eccentric, single and double leg squats and split squats unloaded and with tempo really give the athlete a feel for movement. Yeah, totally agree. I think I've got squats in later, split squats later on, lunges and things like that. But yeah, no. Again, take a great deal of control. It is all about working that control, working the movement, working the core whilst they're doing the exercises. So yeah, thanks for that, Andy. Really good point. Do I share the video with them? Yeah, I don't demonstrate anymore. Question from Mary. Yes, I do share the videos. 9 times out of 10, if it's not raining, I will have the laptop out at the side of the track. We will actually look at things in between, especially when we've got longer recovery sessions. We do a lot of videos, a lot of feedback. The athletes will have a look at the videos themselves, but something complicated like that, I will tend for the first few sessions to show them the video of somebody doing it so that they've got an idea what they're doing, and then from that start to get some of the other athletes to demonstrate once they get up and going on it. What the benefit of pogos? Foot contacts. I really, something we've really increased the amount of work we do on. It's teaching the foot to hit the ground, be in a dorsiflex position, which you'll hear a lot, but I talk about getting the foot being prepared for the plant and the takeoff. So something we're trying is actually to pull a little toe out as they're running. Just pull a little toe out a tiny bit, which actually starts to stiffen the foot up, because what we're really trying to get is the foot to hit the ground in a really sort of stiff ready position to be able to absorb the power that it gets into the track to then get the stretch reflex reaction and react off the track. So it's something we spend a lot of time doing and a lot of time really trying to prepare the athletes on, because I think there's massive gains to be made on increasing or decreasing the time of the foot contacts. I talk to the athletes about if we can decrease that foot contact time by 1/100th of a second over 100 meters, that's, you know, somewhere between 0.3 and half a second, depending on how many steps they take. So we can get massive gains by making very small changes. So something we really work on is the really small stuff, but doing it really well, as I said at the start. We aren't face to face, so how can we incorporate this into their back gardens? Send them a YouTube clip of it. Try and find a YouTube clip of that. I'm quite happy to share things and share the clip out. I've ended up having to get lots of parents' email addresses, athletes' email addresses to be able to send information out to them. So just get the addresses, share it out. We are trying to set up on Sunday a call with all the athletes where they can all dial in, discuss with each other what they're doing. We can have a chat with them about what we are going to continue to do, where we go and how we do it. So being in a wheelchair, I can't demo, so I use videos. Being an ex-athlete and ex being the operative word, I can't demonstrate. So yeah, videos are very good as well, Paul. Any others? Lots of good stuff with Athletics 365 on some of these aspects as well from Matt. Would you start your supply session with a warm-up, incorporating jump stick work? Yes, I would. I would always start with all the drills, some of the contact drills we've been looking at, some of the pogos, but before that it will be some lunges, lots of active dynamic warm-ups, just easy skips, things like that that I'd introduced before we ever did any plyometrics. We wouldn't go straight into plyometrics. It would be a good 20-25 minutes warm-up, absolutely minimum, before we went into any plyos. I also include warm-up and stretches with drills. Yeah, we from Paul Smith we do some active stretches in as part of the warm-up. So we will bring in active warm-ups as part of that. Martin's just dropped in, Martin Rush, lots of videos on Athletics 365, as Les said. You can get a free copy through here, and has put a link on through that, which it's certainly worth having a look at and getting if you haven't already got it. So if we go back to the presentation, just conscious that it's 6:45 and people's tea will be calling. So from there, basic plyometrics, it was queued up very nicely for me, that one. Yes, great opportunity to bring some basic plyometrics in. Everyone gets a bit hung up on plyometrics. It's basically any movement that involves downward movement and reaction back, or a reaction outwards. It's something that involves contact and reactions. Focus very much on technical proficiency over volume. We don't do a lot of high volume plyometrics. I really believe in lots of short contacts, making the contacts really, really quick rather than trying to create lots of height. And we work on the type of action that you get in your running action. Improper technique makes the athlete susceptible to injury, as we saw earlier with the hopping. If you've got some collapsing as an athlete's landing, would I introduce lots of plyometrics? No, I wouldn't. I would really ease back off them. But once an athlete gets proficient, it's a great way to take it on. But then there's some easy plyos you can bring in, which we'll have a look at. Land with a full foot placement, slightly towards the ball of the feet, not heavily on the toes or on the heels. And then we get back to the pre-stretch the Achilles tendon. So that goes back to sort of the pogo point, is you're actually trying to get that Achilles tendon tight so that when you hit the ground, the Achilles will absorb some of the force that comes up through the foot and react off. So again, back to dorsiflex foot on there. First one you can do, skipping. It's dead easy. All the athletes will have skipping ropes. Really, really good. Get the athletes skipping. It is, even younger athletes, it is a great way to get them to get some really good plyometric movement into the training during the day. Great person to follow, Bogdan Bondarenko. I follow him on LinkedIn. He puts a huge amount of his exercises and produces some of the best plyometrics that I've seen. So Bogdan, really good person if you're on LinkedIn to follow. The following videos are some of the exercises he's put out on there. Please remember, these are for older athletes and should only be introduced if they are well conditioned. I wouldn't rush to introduce some of these. One of these is one of the box jumps, and it's sideways on, I'm afraid, but it will give you an idea. You might need to crane your neck a bit, 90 degrees, but it should hopefully give you an idea about what he does. So somebody mentioned about a depth jump earlier. This is just a double foot sort of drop jump, coming back, reacting, and really working the contact off the ground. Personally, for a sprinter, Bogdan is a high jumper, so they naturally react with a slightly more flexed knee as they're coming into the high jump bar. For a sprinter, we're looking a bit more straight legged, so I wouldn't be looking at that amount of knee flexion, but it just gives you a bit of an idea about some of the exercises. This is the sideways on box jump. Again, you can do these even straight onto a step. So if he twisted 90 degrees straight onto a step, he's brought these laterally, and a great introduction to plyometrics that all the athletes can do. They can do them on the steps at the in the hallway, on a step out in the garden, anything. Really, really good way to bring in some plyometrics. Almost logged myself out there by accident. That is the next on the list. So some of the core activation stuff we do. So yeah, Bogdan, really good person to follow. If you can find him on LinkedIn, he's really good, really good person to pick some information off. Any questions on that? I think Paul said with the hurdles, is it the video with the hurdles you mentioned? Which video was that, Jess? Jess, if you type up which video you meant with the hurdle you mentioned, I will see what I can find. If you want to email me separately afterwards, I can always find it. What are your specific cues used with your reactive plyos? I used to talk about them anticipating the ground, and I don't anymore. It used to be, I found if I talked about them anticipating the ground, that they started to drop the toes and think about the ground rather than reacting off it. And the plyometric is very much sort of the bottom end of the sprint action. It's to try and replace that, or try and replicate the that really fast, hard foot contact that we're wanting them to get off the ground. So it is all about, if you get Ralph Mann's book, he talks really extensively about the short time of a contact, and the harder we hit something over the shorter amount of time, the more force is produced. So for the plyometrics, we very much talk about thinking about actually really cueing that foot up, again thinking about the toe being slightly out, but making it a really, really fast contact that no, it is LinkedIn, Lee, but making a really fast contact that, so working the ground, really reacting off the ground and making that contact really, really fast. So really absorbing the force and reacting off the ground really quickly. Are there any other, Alan, what would you do different plyos with different training sessions? Speed compared to starts? Yes, I would. We're going to look at some of the plyo type throws we do for starts. I tend to use plyos as everyone would understand them for maximum velocity mechanics. For starts, I tend to try and replicate the drive phase and then some of the explosive movements coming out. So we'll come on to those, Alan, in a minute, where we'll have a look at some of the exercises we can do, which are slightly different. They are a plyometric based exercise, but for the start itself, the contacts are a bit longer, the body's leaning, so I tend to try and do that slightly differently. We will do that with using different cues and use pushing against somebody, driving back, and then keeping the force driving back. So we'll change how we do things quite a lot for starts, and plyometrics, as most people would understand them, I use them purely for maximum velocity mechanics. Tom, in terms of exercise hierarchy, given that athletes can't sprint on tracks right now, would you put players at the top? No. If they're capable, yes. And it depends what you class as plyos. If it's skipping, if it's the foot contact stuff that we looked at, I would put that as absolutely key at the moment. Yes, we can perhaps, as I'll touch on at the end, we can get out onto fields and things and do fairly similar sessions to what we will be doing at the track. But if an athlete's capable, yes, plyos fairly high up the list. But then plyometrics are really quite taxing, are neurally quite taxing. And if you started to introduce a lot of plyometrics when they had only been part of the training schedule, I'd be worried that that might lead to some injury. So I would work those in and gradually increase them rather than put them and move them directly to the top of the list personally. Meant more in terms of specificity, yes, yeah, definitely. Would you work on posture? Yeah, Andy. I'm going to come on to some posture stuff that you will probably have seen on some of the sessions. So I'm going to come on to some of the posture stuff as well, and how that can be introduced and how that can be worked. That's literally the next set of slides that we look at, is how we introduce posture, what we do, and how we bring that in. There you go. Andy Woodward said Bondarenko is also on Twitter, same content, so well worth following on LinkedIn or Twitter. I may follow him on Twitter as well. Joe said also on YouTube, so well worth following. Pick up quite a few good different little exercises from there. So once again, it's been set up, this time by Andy. Conditioning. Posture conditioning. A big part of what we do is actually trying to bring posture conditioning in with an external stimulus, whether that is a ball or a band, both of which we'll look at through this next section. Notice that this time I haven't said medicine ball, because the chances are the vast majority of athletes won't have them. All of mine are locked up at the athletics track. I can't get in there now, so I can't even say I'll leave one on the driveway, come and pick it up and I'll disinfect it. Anything will do for these. A basketball, football, anything will do. It's basic throwing and core work, maintaining posture through movement. Something that I really believe that the athlete should be working on is actually, rather than just looking at very static planks, is actually starting to try and control themselves while they're actually moving. And then this comes on to Alan's point, is this is some of the basic sort of plyo throws we do, which I think lead very well into the starts mechanics and the drive phase mechanics. So first one we do is extend the core as high as we can, hands up as high as we can, and just throwing the ball, tiny little movements above the head against a wall, tiny little movements backwards and forwards, really trying to extend the core, but just tiny little movements. There's no reason, if an athlete has a football or a basketball, something like that, that will do just as much work on the core and actually controlling it as it will having a medicine ball in. Then we'll want to do one sideways on, just throwing the ball against the wall. Again, try not to twist, keeping the core really tight, arms locked straight, and just tiny little throws against the wall and back. Do that in both directions. Yeah, 21. So this one is literally put a ball against the wall, one hand on top of the other, not across, and it's basically to start to bring some core in to start drill exercises. And it's just basically knee up, and it's a switch, switch, switch. That didn't play very well at my end. I'll try it again. So knee up, switch, 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 and stick it with one hand on top of the other, and it just starts to bring a bit of instability into this, and basically starts to get them thinking about controlling as they're coming out of the blocks. So that's something that all the athletes could do and would really start to help them start to control through the types of forces that they're going to have when they come out of the blocks. Med ball throws. These can be any balls. The ball that Joshua's throwing here was it looks like a med ball. There was no weight in it whatsoever. Usually he'd be on a 4 to 5k medicine ball, so really no weight in it whatsoever. But the movements are still the same. We're still getting good movement skills out from them. So this is literally just coming down to squat position, exploding upwards, and it starts to get some of the starts to replicate what they'll do coming out of the blocks a bit. It's just thinking about the triple extension, loading up and driving out. Getting almost into a start position and loading up through the back foot and just throwing the ball forwards. So loading up, throwing the ball forwards. We'll have a look at that again. So almost getting into start position, loading up, throw the ball forwards. We tend to do this in pairs down at the track, just to save them going and getting the ball all the time. So they'll do this in pairs and really work on loading through the back and the front foot, exploding out and coming through a switch so the front leg ends up at the front, or the back leg ends up at the front. Next one, which is probably a better one for doing by themselves at home. Is this one, and it's a throw and basically chase after the ball. So quite a good dry phase, start and dry phase drill. So throwing the ball and chase after it. If they can get out onto a bigger field, great. If you've got a nice big garden, great. If not, it'll just end up on the wall and not be too far a run. So a throw, chase out after it. I will switch back to the slides again. So Les has put the Twitter Twitter address on for Bondarenko as well. So yeah, he is quite another Bondarenko one. This is quite a good one. I did an element of this, and we've introduced this as an alternative to that, which should be 26 if I've got my numbers right. There we go. And it's basically a hinge at the waist. Again, it's only using a very light medicine ball, so anything will do on this. Hinge at the waist, throw it down twice, different directions, and then back up. See if we can get that again in a bit of a better format. Hinge at the waist, throw down, back up, throw down, back up, and then back up. Switch legs, hinge at the waist, throw down, back up. And there's a lot of stability comes in through this, through the core, through the hips. You're bringing in a lot of single leg stuff in here. So really, really good exercise that you can bring in. Flick back to the PowerPoint. Any questions on that? I've seen some people asking for the stretch sheets. At the end, I'll give you my email address. If you could email me, because I'm not able to write down the email addresses as we're going through. TRX. If you can email me, I will. I'll pull everything together tomorrow and email everybody out a package of the information tomorrow as soon as I can. TRX bands from Paul Smith. Yeah, I'm going to come on to that as well, Paul. You've set me up again nicely. So everyone seems to ask a question just as I'm about to come on to the next section. So yeah, we'll be looking at some of the resistance band work in a minute. Hopefully quite a lot of the athletes have got them. You can still buy them online with fairly quick delivery. So well worth looking at, and we will have a look at those in a moment. You can do the ball against the wall in a lunge position. Yes, you can. I tend to do quite a lot of the resistance band work in a lunge position, but not the balls for some reason. So perhaps something for me to have a think about and perhaps introduce with the athletes, because again, it starts to bring in a tiny bit more instability, starts to make them concentrate a bit more on where the body is, especially coming out of the start. So we do a lot of the resistance band work in lunge positions, as you'll see in a second. But not that much of the ball work, so perhaps something for me to consider. Can I have the ball conditioning slides to share with my athletes, please? Yeah, I will try and find a way of the quite large files of getting them all to you, either dropping them onto YouTube or doing something. So I will try and find a way, and I'll share the videos out with everybody if you want. And if you send me an email address, I'll let you know where and how I can try and get them to you. Paul led on there very well. Small and large resistant bands work. Conscious at 7 o'clock. There's not much to go. Small and large band resistance work still available to purchase online through a variety of retailers. We use these a lot. We use these in pairs, just doing hurdle walkovers where they're pulling the band between them. We'll do a lot of stuff to set the athletes up with these, and it's a great way of athletes to bring some some stability work in really easily, which they can do by themselves. Younger athletes tend to go for the red band, older athletes a black band. I tend not to go much higher than that. If you get any go higher than the black bands, it tends to be really thick and really quite hard to move. The aim of these is to keep the trunk stable and hips engaged whilst moving the external levers. So we can see here, starting to come from a lunge position, a bit lower. We will go lower than that, and we will alter the angle that the bands are at. So they'll pull from low up high, high down low, and almost straight on. So they're in a lunge position. Aim is to lock out the core and just pull the band slowly towards them and slowly release it back in, not letting anything twist. We do it sideways on, again, pulling the band across the body, again, not letting the body twist as the band is pulled across. With the small thinner bands around the knees to start to lock out into a sort of semi-squat position and pull across, so it starts to increase some of the work that's having to be done by some of the external muscles, and start to work on those and actually pull the band across and look at that. We'll do crab walks for the small bands. We will. I haven't put the photos of these on, but they're on the sheet that I'll send out if people email me. We will put the foot through those bands and actually do sort of a high knee pull through, pull across. So we're starting to stretch, work out the legs, and that becomes a very single leg exercise, which is actually really quite difficult to do. Here's a few different ones with the little band. Again, you'll find these online if you have a look. Literally, I've had to take these off my laptop. We must be at around, I don't know whether at 29. Yeah, so this is one pulling across. And just really trying to stop that lateral movement. I've only tried to make these fairly small, try and lock out, so I wouldn't want to see any of the twisting and the body dropping that we saw on there. I'd want them to be really stable, but if you have a look at Bondarenko in a second, you'll get an idea about the stability that a senior athlete can get. 30, this is one. Just to give you an idea about the stability, where you can go with the bands and how you can really start to increase things. Again, I wouldn't do this with younger athletes. They'd have to be really stable before we start to introduce this, but really quite complicated, high-end, difficult exercises. Are these videos exercises named? He hasn't got a name on them actually, but they are on if the same contact's on his LinkedIn, Twitter pages, you will find them and be able to either video them and share them with your athletes, or point your athletes in the direction of that you've got on those. So he doesn't tend to name them. He just tends to put videos of himself doing them online. So, but you'll be able to pick some of those out and actually do them. And there is one more, 31. Again, just give you an idea about where you can go with the exercises. So the old stability wall exercise, but then just bringing in, making it a bit more difficult, bringing a small band in and actually raising one leg up, rather than just doing a one leg raise, actually bringing the band in and making it a bit more difficult. So hopefully it gives you an idea about where you can take things with your athletes and how you can do them. We are going to be talking separately on the disability side. We are going to be doing a separate talk, I understand, as we go forwards, looking at how you integrate disabled athletes into a squad. I won't steal the thunder of the person who's going to be talking through that, but I said at the start we'd look at disability. I really don't believe that you should make, as a coach, huge concessions for disability athletes. Yes, you might have to take a bit longer to get somewhere, but my goal, and I have amputee, CP, visually impaired, a whole cross range of disability athletes that train with us. And my view is I want to get them to the same place as all the other athletes. I want to minimise the effect of their disability. So CP, we may have to do a lot more single leg work because it obviously affects one side more than the other, or the majority of the time it does. So therefore, which side is going to actually hamper them running? It'll be the weaker side. So you probably spend a bit more time on that, strengthening that. Amputee, it depends where the amputation is. If it's above knee, yes, you do need to change things quite a lot. If it's below knee, and they've got a fairly well-fitting socket, you don't need to change much. You can still wrap a band around the blade and they can still do a lot of the work, because the running action is very similar for a below knee amputee athlete as it is an able-bodied athlete. So we tend not to change things that much. So progression, as I hope I've sort of laid out tonight, is progression is no med ball to start with. Med ball in the chest, med ball over the head, med ball circling over the head. Then you start to take the med ball out in front, med ball side to side, circling the med ball. Once I've mastered that, you can start to bring in single leg. If we do single leg, it will tend to be very controlled single leg at start, but then starting to increase the amount of single leg stuff they do, because I really believe there's massive gains that can be made by single leg training. So that's sort of where I've gone on a lot of our training, what I'm trying to get the athletes to do a lot themselves at the moment. The aim over this period, I think Tom picked it up earlier, is to keep the fast foot contact work that we were working on, to keep the athletes moving fast, even if they can't sprint flat out, to keep that fast movement, to keep the fast contact, to keep the muscles twitching, to keep them moving well, to build conditioning. We might as well use it as an excellent opportunity to increase flexibility, to strengthen the foot. Is somewhere I would like to spend a lot more time working on, and just don't as a coach, just due to time pressures. To maintain where our athletes were before we ended up having to leave our tracks ahead of a return to the track, to get them off the Xbox and hopefully them to enjoy themselves and to do stuff that they actually enjoy doing and want to get out and do, rather than it being a chore them doing, to actually get them out and actually make them enjoy things again. If we can train outdoors, so if you have got access to a field and we're still allowed outdoors, I think that may change in the not too distant future, but the limit is your imagination. There's no reason athletes can't do a very, very similar session to what you would have done down at the track. Some back-to-back 60s, some flying runs, some 120s with mixed recoveries, sprints one length of a football pitch, walk another, jog the other two, doing a bit of a fartlek session. There's no reason why they can't do that if there's no grass near them. Lamppost runs, we did them back in the day, and it's sprint a lamppost, walk a lamppost, jog two lampposts, and just to keep them ticking over, keep some of that endurance in there, keep some of the speed in there, but just to keep them ticking over actually with what they're doing. And so there's no reason why, if there's a field nearby, they can't get out and do some of the sessions that you perhaps would have planned for them to do anyway. Upcoming speed webinars, there's one on the 8th of April, which Shani Palmer, the lead for speed, is leading on, and I've tried not to steal too much of her thunder. She's looking at home circuits for power, conditioning, balance and coordination, and we'll hopefully pick up on some of the themes of tonight's talk. What is a ramp warm-up with Harry King? You've got me again, unfortunately, hopefully with better internet connection. I will have less videos, but what front side and back side mechanics have started to look at the biomechanics of running. And then on the 6th of May, we've got Mike Leonard working the energy systems, how much of each, what does it mean, how does that work? Any final questions before I put on my contact details? How should your athletes position themselves in order to allow themselves to load the back leg properly? I basically think of the block start position, and the hips need to be engaged and forwards, the core tight, the back flat, but at the end of the day there needs to be some bend in that back leg, and they need to be able to really load up the Achilles. The biggest thing for me is just loading up the foot and the Achilles. So if we think about the blocks, it's trying to replicate that without the block being there. So perhaps put the first thing I'd get them to do is push the toe down into the track. So get them to push the foot down into the ground. I keep talking tracks, but we haven't got one. Get them to push the foot downwards and then try and push backwards, and then that really loads up the Achilles. So what we try and do is replicate what they would have done if they were actually at the track on the blocks, in order to get some of the explosive movements out. Visually impaired athlete, but I've always included them in everything with little adaptation. Yep, same with me, Paul. The only mistake I've made is said to one of them, why didn't you finish at those cones? And they turned around and said, because I couldn't see them. But apart from that, yeah, I'm just more wary of where their vision is, making sure I'm in front of them. We did have a blind athlete come down for a while with us, and that was, you know, we ended up having to put him in positions to get him to feel it, but he adapted really quickly, and actually he learned really quickly how to move things, and did change things really, really quickly. What would you do for foot strengthening? Basically everything that we've done there, a lot of that is foot strengthening stuff. The pogos, the low level plyos, the medicine ball throws, all of it's foot strengthening. I am going to ask the athletes to try and do a lot more barefooted stuff, not plyometrics, but some of the other stuff, some of the drills and things like that for foot strengthening, because it's an area I think we could really work on. We spend a lot of time doing stuff in trainers and then expect them to put really thin, small spikes on and the foot to be able to take that. I haven't historically done, and some coaches have, a lot of barefoot work, but I'm going to ask them to try and do a bit more barefoot work over this period to try and strengthen that foot whilst they're doing it. But a lot of those exercises barefooted will do it. I'm just not going to expect them to do plyometrics, drop jumps and things like that barefooted. Ankle stability is exactly the same. That goes with foot stability. We do quite a lot of toe heel walks, and again, this is something athletes are going to get this weekend to do. It's something we used to do a lot when we used to do circuits indoors and take the shoes off, and it was actually down onto the heel, coming up onto the toe and holding it and walking along like that. So they're going to be asked to do that, doing that sideways. The hop and sticks is really good for ankle stability. If you want to make it more difficult, hop and stick sideways, hop and stick backwards, all those sort of things will work the ankle stability. So any stick stuff really works the ankle stability, but we're going to start to introduce a bit more barefoot stuff, as I said earlier, into some of that in order to really start to work the foot and the ankle stability work. Yes, it might. There are probably better people to answer that than me, Chris. For plantar fasciitis, what I tend to do is get the athletes to get a golf ball and roll the foot on the golf ball and find the pressure spot and actually then hold into it. But yeah, no, it'd be very interesting to see whether that does actually help with plantar fasciitis. It's something I've not looked into, but yeah, hopefully it will do. And one of the sort of common problems with athletes. So yes, hopefully it will. Any more lamppost ideas? I'm having to adapt and learn as quickly as the rest of you are. If they can find a field, with a football pitch on, anywhere that they can go, anything like that, absolutely great. If not, imagination's a key at the moment, and is just thinking about how we can adapt things to improve the athletes and how we can actually make them better and keep them where they were, so that when they come back, they're absolutely, they are going to be as good as they possibly can be. Calf stretching as well. Yeah, loosen the chain with plantar. Well done, Martin. Yeah. Obviously calves attach in and pull through the Achilles, which then wraps underneath. So calf stretching, really good. Rolling, finding the point on the calf where it's tight and actually holding on to it. Really good ideas. Some really good calf stretches on the sheets that if people want, I will email out. Shuttle runs for mobility, acceleration, deceleration, yeah. Anything like that. There is no reason why, if you've got a park with 40, 50 metres, you can't be doing shuttle runs with fairly fast turnarounds and things like that at the moment, and that will keep a good element of speed. I saw on Facebook one of the athletes I used to do some work with on one of the disability squads for British Athletics was doing some starts in his garden. Josiah, I don't know whether he's listening, but I saw it on Facebook, very impressed. So anything we can do at the moment, imagination's the key. If you've got some area, have a go at it. How much is too much? It very much depends on the athletes. If they're very well conditioned. On the plyos, we tend not to do more than about probably 50 contacts in a session, and a lot of those will be really low level contacts over really low over low level cones. We will tend not to do a great amount of contacts you know, part of the reason I think I'm here as a coach now is because I overdid plyometrics as an athlete and didn't really know what I was doing, and now have a chronically poor back. So I tend to be very, very cautious on the amount of plyos that I do, introduce them very gradually, never do it with any weight, and introduce it very, very gradually into the sessions. Any more questions? Was that poster behind you Olympics? If you notice, I actually move locations to try and get closer to the Wi-Fi box or broadband box or whatever it's called. And yes, it was a painting that was actually painted for something my wife had been involved in for the Olympics, which she managed to get after it being on display in one of the galleries in Preston. So yes, it was to do with the 2012 Olympics. Brill, thank you very much. Can I say thank you to Joshua and Jonathan for their time doing some of the exercises to demonstrate for us. Very short notice. We've tried to pull this together in a few days. If you'd like a copy of any of the information, I will try and get across what I can to you. If I can WeTransfer some of the videos you want, I will do so. My email address is there. Please email me, and I will try and get across all the information I can to you over the next day or two, and I'll get what I can from you. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I hope your training goes well. I hope your athletes stay safe, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you down at a track and a competition very soon. So thank you very much.